Hello again. So tonight is going to be a change of tack. I'm going to present you with something that I think is incredibly important, however, and also something that right now is incredibly relevant. But it's a bit different than what we've been talking about so far. It basically is about empathy and compassion. So we've arrived here by talking about genuine happiness and saying, well, there are these causes of genuine happiness. Some of them are just an ability to rest in your natural state. You get good at that, of course. It brings about an overall sense of well-being that's hard to deny. But you can really, I mentioned in the very first session, say, well, we do say that you can achieve high levels, higher than average levels of well-being. And to do that, then you need the attention training, emotional understanding, and additionally, we talk about kindness, compassion, equanimity, these sorts of things. So this course isn't about that. We're not going to go into those in any detail. That's easy enough to find in other courses or any other work you'd like to do. What I'd like to do is just talk about how empathy and compassion work and how they can get us into trouble. And this is especially true at this current time when we've got all sorts of things going on for us, such as, we've had big bushfires here in Australia and around the world. The COVID-19 virus is taking off, where it's very, very easy to encounter difficulty and suffering in our media, just our everyday day-to-day lives. And it doesn't mean that the person next to me or the person next door or these sorts of people are in any huge amounts of distress, but on the television, through the internet and so on, it's everywhere. And I mentioned we have a negativity bias. The media does play to that because you get clicks and ratings by playing to that negativity bias. That's a whole other issue. The point is that we very easily encounter people in difficulty, whether they're close to us or abstract. And if you have any level of what we call effective empathy, that means you sort of share that experience with others, then that puts you in distress as well, to some degree, sometimes a very high degree. Once you're in distress, you're experiencing an emotion, so it's important to understand how all this works. And if you're stuck just in this empathic sort of cycle, we're just feeling, you're sharing the experience of other people, and if the people you're sort of encountering, whether it be in person or online or through the media, are people in distress, and if you're watching the news, or you're going to see a lot of that, then what happens is you end up in quite a lot of distress. We sort of think about people as being, empathy as being an admirable quality in people, and it is, but it's a one-way ticket to burnout if that's all we have, and we know this. We see it in the medical profession, teaching profession. We just see it with parents, stressed out parents with children, all over the place. And you're just constantly, resonating with these people, and the stress that you're seeing, you're in distress too. So if that's all you've got, then of course you end up strung out and burned out. And that's why compassion is so important, because compassion actually, it requires some training. It does need to be trained, but you can use your empathy to have a compassionate response that protects you from this burnout. This course, is very short. It's not about that entirely, but I thought it's helpful maybe to give you an idea of just where you can go with what we've been talking about this far. So let me just flip over to the slides and we'll have a look at this. So sometimes, you heard me, I think I just used the term empathic distress just then. You do hear about it, and it's unfortunate. You do hear some people talk about this term compassion fatigue. And from the perspective I'm about to present to you, I will say there is no such thing as compassion fatigue. Empathic distress is very real, and it's very dangerous, and it's a big problem in all sorts of fields, healthcare, education, I mentioned already. But it's not because of compassion. So let's have a look. Firstly, just a few definitions that, I'm big on this. I have a language background and I was a translator, so I like words. Let's have a look at empathy, taken straight from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Is the action of understanding, being aware of the experience of another without the the feelings, thoughts, and experience communicated in an objectively explicit manner. So it's just simply understanding the experience of somebody else. We tend to think of it as being negative because, of course, we think about it in terms of suffering, but laughter is an emotional contagion as well. There are positive empathic responses as well, at least constructive ones. So, but we're interested here in burnout, and that means distress, basically, of one kind or another. Now, you think about it in this way, that empathy happens if you see somebody hit in the left side of the face with a frisbee or a football or something at the park. If you reach for the same side of the face as the person you saw hit, for example. There's this immediate sharing of the experience with the other person. Of course, you don't feel the physical pain, but you have this immediate response. Emotionally, it's a little more sort of strong, if you like, in as much as if you see someone in emotional distress, that very easily puts you in emotional distress as well. It can be anything from a hungry baby crying is a great example, because the baby's in distress. In fact, I would say this has evolved over generations to be the perfect noise to motivate us, to put us in distress, to act, that when we hear a crying baby. But when we do that, when we do hear that crying baby, puts us in distress to some degree, because now you know a little bit about emotions already. So if I'm in distress, I'm emotional. What is it about emotions? Emotions are short-term sort of fixes, and they make it about me. So now, even though I might go ahead and attend to the baby's needs, whatever they might be, and do it perfectly well, to some degree, it's driven by my own emotional regulation. It's my own distress, and wanting to alleviate my distress as well is a big part of it. I believe, I haven't read research on it, but I believe it's kind of an evolutionary trick to get us to look after each other, and it works well. It's great. So there you have it. It's an empathic response. Baby cries, now I'm in distress, and I just get up and automatically fix whatever is going on. And there are plenty of other examples. Compassion, I take from the same dictionary. Compassion here they describe as a sympathetic consciousness. You could just think of that, I think, as an understanding. Works well. Understanding of others' distress together with a desire to alleviate it, and understanding of their distress. So this is referencing one way or another empathy. But then empathy, it doesn't stop there. Now there's actually this genuine wish that the individual you're dealing with not experience the suffering, the difficulty that they are suffering. So remember, this is taken straight out of the Merriam-Webster dictionary. I've also got a Buddhist definition of compassion here, which is an uncontrived, ideally. At first, it's contrived, of course. But as an aspiration that beings, you could just say people if you want to, be free from suffering and its causes, and that includes ourselves. So you can see there, it maps very neatly onto the dictionary definition, actually. They're very similar. What they both rely on is an understanding of the suffering of somebody else, the difficulty of somebody else. And what that means is an empathic response of some kind. So you can't develop compassion without empathy. If all you've got is empathy, all you've got is distress. You will burn out. I mean, I don't want to get ranting on you, but this is the problem. This is why we have so much burnout in the healthcare profession. They're not trained in how to deal with empathy. So, interestingly enough, in Buddhism, we separate out compassion and kindness. We talk about kindness as being a wish that people be happy or beings be happy. Ideally genuine happiness, just to be clear, but any happiness will do, we'll take it, any of it. Whereas compassion is this desire they not suffer, to break them up. Anyway, it's just a little interesting aside. So have a look at this. Here's a model of how empathy can work, or how empathy basically does work. I encounter someone in distress. I have an empathic response that it captures my attention. It makes the focus now, things are about me. Why? Because I'm emotional. That's how emotions work. And it's very easy for me to go into some kind of distress in response to somebody else's distress. I don't even need to find an actual trigger that sets me off now. I can become emotional based on encountering another emotional person. Then that leads to emotional exhaustion, burnout, or what some people mistakenly call compassion fatigue, which is actually empathic distress. We'll come to that. So that's a pretty normal trajectory. Someone's in distress, now I'm in distress. I'll still try to alleviate. I might do really great work, but that level of distress never had an outlet. And over time, it burns people down, it wears them down. Here, what if I bring my attention back under my control, the same way I do in an emotional timeline? Now I see this whole thing as an emotional timeline. I see this as a distraction. I start to see this all functioning in the same way. So now I go from here, I pull my attention back under my control. That means all these other things aren't there anymore. They're gone. That just by noticing the attentional capture, so I notice my own distress, notice my attentional capture, relax, bring my attention back under my control. And now what I can do is actually make sure that I am focusing on the distress of others. Counterintuitively, the way to protect yourself from burnout is to make sure your attention is actually on the distress of others and not your actions aren't being driven by your own distress. So to be clear, the empathic response that puts you in distress is quite admirable, right? It's a positive quality. It's a necessary part of compassion. It's all good. However, the results of just staying there are not really good. You will burn out. So then we're left with this we call it compassion satisfaction or professional satisfaction, pro-social responses, and so on. But it's not so much about the actual action. So if we put these two, I can put the two pathways together like this. So you have the top one there is the first one I showed, which is our regular attentional capture into these automatic responses, which will lead to burnout for the most part. The bottom pathway here, go down, that's about pulling your attention back under my control, now pushing it back out onto the distress and then acting. From the outside, so have a think about this, because I'm sort of just laying this on you fairly early on quite quickly. From the outside, a person observing someone doing these on these two pathways won't necessarily notice the difference. You can get up and sort of attend to a baby's needs or a patient's needs or a client's needs. You can do that out of an empathic sort of automatic response, especially if you have training. Parents, of course, you've trained yourself to look after kids. Doctors have trained themselves to look after patients. Nurses the same. Teachers with students. You've trained yourself. So now there's an empathic response, and you have this, your automatic response is still positive. It goes across and say, oh yeah, you work in and you try to alleviate the suffering as best you can. Cool, it's great. However, it's possible to do it with, as I said, as an automatic empathic response. It's also possible, which means your attention's been captured and pulled away, quite frankly. As opposed to, noticing it's happened, relaxing, bringing my attention back, and now doing the same action, exactly the same, completely indistinguishable from the outside. But now my attention isn't about me anymore. I very deliberately put my attention back out on the distress of the other person, and I have this wish that be alleviated. Compassion is cognitive. It's not about the action. It's mental. It's mental. I'll say that again. Compassion isn't about the action. You can have an action. You can have someone do good, motivated by their own reputation. There's no compassion involved, right? Is it kind of virtuous and positive? Sure, great. However, they could be getting themselves a lot more bang for their own mental health part if they understood compassion properly. You can also perhaps be in a situation where you can't act and there's nothing you can do. Nonetheless, you can still develop this wish that these people not suffer or these beings not endure that. Bang, you're starting to work on compassion. If from that mental aspect of wanting them not to suffer, you can act, now we've got compassionate action, which is better, right? It's better than just compassion. Compassion's great. It'll keep you protected. Compassionate action's even better. But there are times when you can't act. Or there are times when the best action is not to act, which is very, very hard sometimes. Look, as I said, this is very much throwing you in the deep end, just giving you an idea of how all this works to help you understand. But no doubt there are going to be people doing this course who are healthcare professionals or psychologists or whatever, who do meet people in distress. And I really hope this gives some explanation as the mechanics of that and how it works. And of course, if you can change between these two attentions and bring it back under your control, and you will be better at that now because you've already done a week's worth of training in it and you can just keep going, and of course, then you end up with, that mindfulness gives you this ability to, perspective taking, if you like, emotion regulation. Most importantly, here on the right-hand side, this compassion fatigue, we just get rid of it because there's no such thing. No one in the history of humanity ever burned out by wishing other people didn't suffer. I'm willing to bet that. Burnout is still very real though. So what you get here is empathic distress, right? Attention capture leading to empathic distress and burnout. Attention control. And this is the great, so attention control is great. I've been on about it a lot, but you need a plan. And I've been saying this all along. You need a plan to say, oh, in these situations where I can catch myself doing something that's not constructive, next time it happens, I'm going to try to do this. Okay, good. When it comes to compassion, it's like next time I encounter any difficulty, I'm going to make sure that when I notice the attentional capture, I put my attention back out on the person and their needs and their distress, and then away I go. Because, and here it is, the focal, if you're going to cultivate compassion, okay, the focal object is suffering. The focal object is difficulties. Why? Because we define compassion as the wish, or the understanding and wish that people don't suffer. So you're stuck with that, I'm afraid. It's counterintuitive, but it is an absolutely turbocharged way to develop genuine happiness. If you walk that backwards, it's important to be able to rest in your natural state. First, you need the attention skills to notice when your attention is captured. So there you have it. So what I would ask, and in the morning, we'll do this a little bit more in the last session, just as you do your meditations, just for a moment in the beginning and end, just spare a thought for other people. That is to say, try to go into the meditation, of course, looking after yourself is incredibly important, but also with this aspiration that by looking after yourself in this way, there'll be a ripple effect out into others, that you will affect others, that you will positively, influence and benefit others. So I hope that's clear. Probably a bit of a surprise. I don't know if you're expecting that this evening, but what I'd really like you to have is, as I said, a very good understanding of mindfulness and meditation and how it works for your own mental health, but also kind of a window into just how big it is. And I've only touching the surface here in terms of developing high levels of mental health and well-being, right? Starting to sort of think more like a, mental athlete, I guess. Because, I've said it before that if you can do the training and understand the diet and how it works and the science behind it, then this is definitely a pathway to extraordinarily high levels of mental health and well-being, and dependent on your outside circumstances. Not only that, but actually, when things get difficult is actually when you can start to boost up and ramp up your compassion and attention training. So as we go into, at the moment it's March, and we're going into this COVID-19 lockdown, things are really escalating quite quickly here in Australia. And we're going to see a lot of difficulties and suffering. We already are in other countries. We need a way through. And quite frankly, this is it. Mindfulness training, attention training, compassion, and emotion skills. And you can use it anywhere. I've given an example already during the week. When I went and I did some shopping over a week ago, we just stocked up in case we're in for 14 days, my wife and I, Kirsty and me. And, I really don't like shopping. I really don't like supermarkets. And what I kept noticing several times while I was in there is that I had this thought process, and it's only natural thought process that, if I get sick, I need to be, or more like this, like, I don't want to get sick. I need to hole up at home in the hope that I don't get sick. But actually, we know that's not actually what the social distancing is about. It's actually about trying to stop the spread for others. And so it was a lost opportunity. I kept having to remind myself that actually the reason we're doing this is so that vulnerable parts of the population are less susceptible. And this means people, my parents age, I know plenty of people in that vulnerable category. And I could have turned the unpleasant trip to the supermarket, which I really don't like doing. When I catch myself thinking, I've got to do this because I don't want to get sick, and just flipping that around and say, actually, I'm here because I want as fewer people to get sick, and I really want vulnerable people not to get sick, and that's why I'm here. Then something as miserable as going to the shopping center or going to a supermarket can be a compassionate act. I hope that's clear. Same act, going there and stocking up, right? Because I need to, because I'll be here for 14 days quite possibly. But it's the motivation, it's the mental side of things that defines whether it's a compassionate act or not. So please, in your meditations, in anything you can find, anything you can do, anything as you encounter the media and so on, please, if you believe that genuine happiness is a worthwhile thing to strive for, and you must because you're here. If you believe that being in your natural state will help, excellent. If you think you can go beyond that and that actually having this, the courageous kind of mindfulness that now places your attention back out on the difficulty and sufferings of others and hopes, really wishes that it be alleviated, even takes responsibility and thinks, I'll do what I can to help, then you are in the domain of absolute, kind of turbocharged mental health. And it doesn't sound like it, because you feel like you're in this domain of suffering, but it's what's going on for you mentally that's important. All right, bit of ranting. I hope that's okay. We'll have a think about it. Please do another meditation session this evening if you have the time. Try to qualify it, by imagining a ripple effect that the practice you're doing is beneficial for others as well. And then we'll meet for the last time tomorrow morning. Quick meditation session, and then I'll cut you loose. But I think you'll have plenty to work on, and of course there's plenty of other things that you can get in touch, and other courses going on online, and at some point in person again very soon. Look, thanks very much for your time. I genuinely appreciate it, and I'll see you in the morning. Bye.